I thought he was the love of my life, till the DNA test proved my son wasn't his. But what it revealed about my own mother? That's what truly shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. What I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. Because sometimes the truth isn't just painful, it's absolutely devastating. My name is Sarah, and 3 years ago, I thought I had the perfect life mapped out. I was 28, living in Portland with my boyfriend Marcus, and we'd just welcomed our son Dylan into the world. Marcus and I had been together for 4 years. We met at a coffee shop near the university, where I was finishing my master's degree in social work. He was this charming, funny guy who made terrible jokes and always remembered exactly how I liked my latte. From the very beginning, Marcus felt like home. You know that feeling when you meet someone and it's like puzzle pieces clicking into place? That was us. He'd drive 2 hours just to bring me soup when I was sick. He remembered every little thing, my favorite Thai restaurant, the way I folded my socks, how I always needed the TV volume on an even number. When I got pregnant, he cried harder than I did. Happy tears, of course. He immediately started planning the nursery, reading parenting books, and talking to my belly every single night. My family absolutely adored Marcus. My mom, Linda, would constantly tell me how lucky I was to find such a good man. She'd grown up without her father around, and she always emphasized how important it was to have a stable, loving partner. My stepdad Robert had raised me since I was 3, and he and Marcus bonded immediately over their shared love of woodworking and terrible dad jokes. Even my usually skeptical younger sister Emma approved of him. When Dylan was born, Marcus was right there beside me, holding my hand through 14 hours of labor. He cut the umbilical cord with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. "He's perfect," he whispered, cradling our son for the first time. "He looks just like you, Sarah." And Dylan did look like me, at least, that's what everyone said. He had my dark hair, my button nose, my stubborn chin. Marcus would joke that Dylan got all my features and his appetite because that kid could eat. We fell into this beautiful rhythm of parenthood together. Marcus would wake up for the 3 a.m. feedings without complaint, singing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. He taught Dylan to grip his finger, spoke to him in silly voices, and documented every milestone with the dedication of a professional photographer. Life felt complete. We weren't married yet, but we were planning a small ceremony for the following spring. Marcus had already started calling me his wife when we were out with friends, and I loved how that sounded. We found a little house with a yard perfect for Dylan to play in once he started crawling. Everything was falling into place exactly as I'd dreamed. My relationship with my mother had always been close, maybe even a little intense. After my biological father left when I was 2, it was just me and her for a year before she met Robert. She used to tell me we were a team, that we only had each other to count on. Even after Robert came into the picture, and he was wonderful. Don't get me wrong, there was always this special bond between my mother and me. She was my best friend, my confidant, the person I called first with any news. Mom was absolutely smitten with Dylan. She'd come over almost daily, bringing homemade baby food in tiny outfits she couldn't resist buying. She'd hold him for hours, singing the same lullabies she used to sing to me. "He's going to be a heartbreaker, just like his mama," she'd coo, bouncing him on her lap. She had this way of making everything feel magical and safe. Looking back now, I can see there were small things that should have registered as odd. Mom was almost possessive of Dylan in a way that seemed unusual, even for a grandmother. She'd get upset if Marcus's parents visited and held Dylan too long. She'd make comments about how Dylan had good genes and would grow up to be nothing like those men who abandon their families. At the time, I chalked it up to her own abandonment issues and her fierce protectiveness over our little family unit. Marcus never complained about my mother's intensity. He understood that she'd have been hurt before, and that her fierce love for Dylan came from a good place. He'd gently encourage her to let him help with Dylan when she'd try to take over during visits. But he never made me feel like I had to choose between them. Those first few months with Dylan were honestly the happiest of my life. Exhausting, overwhelming, terrifying, but happy. Marcus and I were building something beautiful together. We had this perfect little boy who felt like the culmination of all our love. We'd lie in bed at night, Dylan sleeping peacefully between us, and plan out his future. Would he be artistic like me, Mechanically minded like Marcus? Maybe he'd be a doctor or a teacher, or hell, maybe he'd invent something that would change the world. We felt invincible, like we'd figured out the secret to happiness and nothing could touch us. I should have known that feeling never lasts. The first crack in our perfect world appeared when Dylan was about 6 months old. We were at Marcus's parents' house for his nephew's birthday party, and Dylan was the center of attention, as babies tend to be. Marcus's sister-in-law Jen was holding Dylan and making those exaggerated baby talk voices that everyone does. "Oh my goodness," she suddenly said, holding Dylan up to look at his face more closely. "He's getting so big. But you know what's funny? He doesn't really look like either of you." The comment hung in the air for a moment. Marcus laughed it off immediately. "Are you kidding? He's got Sarah's nose and chin. Everyone says he looks just like her." But Jen persisted. In that way people do when they think they're being helpful, but are actually being incredibly obtuse. "I don't know, his eyes are so different, and the shape of his face. Maybe he'll grow into looking more like you guys." I felt this weird flutter in my stomach, but I pushed it down. Babies change so much in their first year. Of course, he might not look exactly like us yet. I had brown eyes. Marcus had hazel eyes. And Dylan S. were this striking blue-green color that we both assumed would eventually settle into one or the other. But once Jen planted that seed, I couldn't unsee it. Over the next few weeks, I found myself studying Dylan's features obsessively. His nose, which I'd always thought looked like mine, suddenly seemed different. His hair, which had been dark like mine at birth, was lightening to an almost sandy brown color. His eyes weren't shifting toward brown or hazel. They were staying that unusual blue-green. I started paying attention to comments from strangers. "Oh, he doesn't look like either of you," became a phrase I heard with disturbing frequency. At first, people would follow it up with, "But he's adorable," as if that made it better. But the comments kept coming. From the pediatrician's nurse, from other parents at the baby music class I'd joined, from the cashier at the grocery store, Marcus seemed completely unbothered by these observations. "Babies don't look like anyone sometimes," he'd say when I'd bring it up. "He's got your stubbornness and my sweet tooth. That's what matters." But I could see him starting to study Dylan's face too, though he'd quickly look away when he caught me watching. The real turning point came during a family barbecue at my mother's house. Dylan was 8 months old and had just started crawling. He was scooting around the backyard, exploring everything with that fearless curiosity that terrifies parents. And my sister Emma was visiting from Seattle, and she was absolutely enchanted with her nephew. "God, Sarah, he's just beautiful," she said, scooping Dylan up and spinning him around. "Look at those gorgeous eyes. They're so unusual." "Yeah, we're not sure who he gets those from," I replied, trying to sound casual. Emma stopped spinning and looked at Dylan more carefully, then at me, then at Marcus, who was flipping burgers nearby. "You know what's weird? Those eyes? They remind me of someone." "Oh yeah, who?" Emma's face scrunched up in concentration. "I can't place it. Someone we know, but I can't think of who." She shrugged and went back to playing with Dylan, but the comment lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. That night, after everyone had gone home and Dylan was asleep, I brought it up with Marcus. "Do you think Dylan looks like us?" Marcus set down his beer and looked at me seriously. "Sarah, what's going on? I've been asking about this a lot lately." "I know, everyone keeps commenting on how different he looks." Emma said his eyes remind her of someone, but not us. "Babies grow into their features. You know that. Remember your cousin's kid? She looked nothing like anyone in the family for the first year, and now she's basically a clone of your aunt." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just Dylan's appearance, though, that was becoming harder to ignore. It was the way my mother acted around him. She'd always been affectionate with children, but with Dylan, it was different. More intense. Almost desperate. I started noticing things I'd overlooked before. How she'd get emotional watching Dylan play, tears in her eyes for no apparent reason. How she'd make strange comments about genetics and bloodlines. How she seemed to know exactly how to soothe him in ways that even surprised me as his mother. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was looking through old photo albums, trying to find baby pictures of Marcus and me to compare with Dylan's photos. My mother was visiting, and she was helping me organize the albums while Dylan napped. "Oh, honey, look at this one," she said, pulling out a photo I'd never seen before. It was a picture of a man holding a baby, both of them laughing. The baby in the photo had distinctive blue-green eyes and sandy brown hair. "Who's this?" I asked. My mother's face went white. She quickly tried to put the photo back, but I grabbed it first. "Mom, who is this?" Just just an old friend. From a long time ago." But I was staring at the baby in the photo, and my heart started pounding. The resemblance to Dylan was unmistakable. Not subtle, not maybe if you squint. It was like looking at Dylan's twin. "Mom," I said slowly, "this baby looks exactly like Dylan." "Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. All babies look similar." But her hands were shaking, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. For the first time in my life, I was absolutely certain my mother was lying to me. The photo haunted me for days. I hid it in my jewelry box, taking it out when Marcus wasn't around to stare at it and compare it to pictures of Dylan. The resemblance wasn't just striking, it was impossible to ignore. Same eye color, same hair texture, same smile. Even the same little dimple on the left cheek that I'd always thought was unique to Dylan. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. New mother anxiety was a real thing, right? Maybe I was just overthinking everything because I was sleep-deprived and hormonal. But every time I looked at Dylan, then at Marcus, then back at Dylan, the doubt grew stronger. Marcus could tell something was eating at me. "You've been weird for weeks," he said, one evening, after I'd been unusually quiet during dinner. "What's going on, Sarah?" "Don't tell me it's nothing, because you're clearly upset about something." I almost told him about the photo right then, almost pulled it out and showed him and demanded answers. But something held me back. Maybe it was fear of what those answers might be. Maybe it was the hope that I was wrong, that I was creating problems where none existed. "I think I need to talk to someone," I said instead, "like a therapist. I've been having these anxious thoughts about Dylan, and I don't think they're normal." Marcus immediately softened. "Of course, babe, whatever you need. Postpartum anxiety is really common. We'll find you someone good." But even as I made the appointment with a therapist, I knew the real issue was on anxiety, was the growing certainty that something fundamental about my life was a lie. The therapist, Dr. Martinez, was kind and patient as I explained my concerns. I told her about the comments from strangers, about Dylan's unusual features, about my growing obsession with whether he looked like Marcus and me. I didn't mention the photo. I wasn't ready to voice that suspicion out loud yet. "These kinds of doubts can be really distressing," she said, "but they're more common than you might think. New parenthood brings up a lot of unconscious fears and anxieties. Tell me, what do you think you're really afraid of?" "I guess I'm afraid that my life isn't what I think it is. That the people I trust most have been lying to me." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "That's a very specific fear. Has someone given you reason to doubt their honesty?" And that's when I broke down and told her about the photo. About my mother's reaction, her obvious lie, the way she'd been acting around Dylan. Dr. Martinez listened without judgment, asking gentle questions and helping me work through what I was really afraid of. "It sounds like you're carrying a heavy burden of uncertainty," she said finally. "Have you considered that there might be a way to get concrete answers to your questions? You mean a paternity test? I mean, whatever would help you feel more secure in your relationships, in your role as Dylan's mother." I left that session with a prescription for anxiety medication. I probably didn't need a decision I definitely didn't want to make. But the uncertainty was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work, couldn't enjoy time with Dylan, because I was constantly analyzing his features and behaviors. The final push came from an unexpected source. Marcus's mom called me one afternoon while I was home alone with Dylan. "Sarah, honey, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything okay? Marcus seems worried about you." I almost brushed her off, but something in her voice, genuine concern, maternal warmth, made me crack. "Can I ask you something? And will you give me an honest answer?" "Of course. Do you think Dylan looks like Marcus?" "Sweetie, why are you asking me that? Please, just tell me honestly." Another pause. "I think Dylan is a beautiful, healthy baby, and that's what matters. But if you're having doubts about something, maybe you should address them directly instead of letting them eat at you." That was as close to a no as I was going to get from my diplomatic mother-in-law, and we both knew it. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, I sat in Dylan's nursery watching him sleep and made the decision. I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. Needed to know the truth, whatever it was. If Marcus was Dylan's father, the test would put my anxieties to rest and maybe save our relationship from my growing paranoia. If he wasn't, well, then I'd deal with that reality when I faced it. I researched DNA testing companies online, reading reviews and comparing accuracy rates. I settled on one that promised results within a week and allowed for discrete sample collection. I could order everything online and collect samples at home, no awkward conversations with lab technicians or doctors. The testing kit arrived 3 days later in an unmarked package. Inside were cotton swabs, collection tubes, and instructions that seemed both simple and terrifying. All I needed were saliva samples from Dylan and Marcus. Easy to collect, impossible to undo once I sent them in. I stared at that kit for 2 days before I worked up the courage to use it. I collected Dylan's sample first, during his afternoon nap, gently swabbing the inside of his cheek while he slept peacefully. He stirred slightly, but didn't wake up. Getting Marcus's sample was trickier. I waited until he was brushing his teeth one morning, then casually asked if I could use his toothbrush because mine had fallen in the sink. He laughed and handed it over without a second thought. I felt like a criminal, swabbing his saliva from the toothbrush bristles and sealing it in the collection tube. The return packaging sat on my kitchen counter for another day. Once I mailed it, there would be no taking it back. The truth would be revealed whether I was ready for it or not. But I was already drowning in uncertainty. At least with the test, I'd know what I was dealing with. I mailed the package on a Tuesday morning after Marcus left for work. The longest week of my life began the moment I dropped that package in the mailbox. I found myself checking my email obsessively, refreshing the testing company's website multiple times a day to see if results were ready. I'd signed up for text notifications, email alerts, everything they offered, but nothing could make that week pass faster. I was a wreck. Marcus noticed immediately that something was wrong, but I blamed it on work stress and general new mom exhaustion. Every time he held Dylan or played with him, I felt sick to my stomach, not because I didn't want them to bond, but because I was terrified. I was about to destroy the most important relationship in my son's life. "You're jumpy as hell," Emma observed during one of our regular phone calls. "What's going on?" "Nothing, just tired." "Sarah, you sound like you're about to have a panic attack. Are you okay?" I wanted to tell her everything about the photo, about my suspicions, about the test I'd already sent in. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words out loud. What if I was wrong? What if I was about to blow up my entire life over some misguided paranoia? By day 6, I was barely functioning. I'd called in sick to work twice, claiming Dylan had a fever. But really, I just couldn't concentrate on anything except my phone and email. Marcus was starting to ask more serious questions about my mental health, and I was running out of excuses. The notification came on a Thursday at 2:47 p.m. I was sitting in my car outside Dylan's daycare, getting ready to pick him up when my phone buzzed with a text. "Your DNA results are ready. Log in to view your report." My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely unlock my phone. I sat there in the parking lot, other parents walking past my car, and opened the email app with my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I clicked the link, entered my login information, and waited for the page to load. It felt like hours, but it was probably only seconds before the results appeared on my screen. Based on the DNA analysis, Marcus Johnson is excluded as the biological father of Dylan Thompson. The probability of paternity is 0%. I stared at those words until they blurred together. 0%, not 85%, not 95%, not even 99%, 0%. There was absolutely no possibility that Marcus was Dylan's biological father. I dropped my phone and started hyperventilating right there in the daycare parking lot. A concerned parent knocked on my window, asking if I was okay, but I couldn't even respond. I just sat there, gasping for air, and feeling like my entire world had collapsed in the span of a single sentence. The man I loved. The man who had held my hand through labor and sung lullabies to our son and planned our future together, he wasn't Dylan's father. Which meant I had cheated on him, except I knew with absolute certainty that I hadn't. I'd never been with anyone else during our relationship. Never even been tempted. Which meant, what? That I'd been assaulted and somehow blocked it out. That I'd had some kind of psychotic break. Nothing made sense. The timeline was impossible. Dylan had been conceived in late May, or early June, and I could account for every day of that time period. Marcus and I had been practically inseparable. I eventually managed to pull myself together enough to go into the daycare and collect Dylan. I held him extra tight, studying his face with new eyes. Oh, those blue-green eyes that didn't belong to Marcus. That sandy brown hair that wasn't from either of us. Features that reminded Emma of someone she couldn't place. The drive home was a blur. I kept glancing at Dylan in his car seat, this little person I loved more than life itself, and feeling like I was looking at a stranger. Not because I loved him any less, but because nothing about his existence made sense anymore. Marcus was home early that day, some cruel twist of fate. He took one look at me and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. "Sarah, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't speak. I just stood there in our entryway, holding Dylan with tears streaming down my face. Marcus gently took Dylan from me and set him in his bouncy seat, then pulled me into his arms. "Talk to me, babe. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." That's when I completely broke down. I sobbed into his chest for what felt like hours, while he held me and whispered reassurances that everything would be okay. Except everything wouldn't be okay. Nothing would ever be okay again. When I finally stopped crying enough to speak, I pulled away from him and looked into his kind, confused eyes. "Marcus, I did something. Something I can't take back." "Okay. What did you do?" I went to my purse and pulled out my phone, opening the DNA results page with shaking hands. I turned the screen toward him without saying a word. I watched his face as he read the results. Watched the confusion shift to shock, then to hurt, then to something that might have been anger or devastation, or both. He read it twice, then looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "I don't either." "Are you telling me, ... He paused, clearly struggling to form the words. "Are you telling me that Dylan isn't my son? According to this, no, but that means you, ... Couldn't finish the sentence. "Marcus, I swear to you on Dylan's life, I have never cheated on you, not once, not ever. I don't understand how this is possible." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to reconcile the woman he knew with what the test results implied. The man who had trusted me completely, who had never once questioned Dylan's parentage, was suddenly faced with what looked like undeniable proof of my infidelity. "Then how do you explain this, Sarah? Because right now, I feel like I don't know you at all." Marcus left that night. He packed a bag while I sat on our bed, watching him move around the room like a stranger. Dylan was crying in his crib. He always seemed to sense when something was wrong, but neither of us went to comfort him. We were both too shattered to function as parents in that moment. "I need time to think," Marcus said, not looking at me as he zipped up his overnight bag. "I need to figure out what this means." "Where are you going?" "My brother's place. I just... ... I can't be here right now, Marcus. Please. I know how this looks, but I'm telling you the truth. I don't understand what's happening any more than you do." He finally looked at me then, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. "Sarah, I want to believe you. But the math is pretty simple here. If Dylan isn't my son, and you say you didn't cheat, then what's the explanation? Immaculate conception?" I didn't have an answer for him. Couldn't blame him for leaving, for needing space to process this impossible situation. But watching him walk out that door felt like watching my entire life disappear. After he left, I called in sick to work for the rest of the week. Couldn't think about anything except the test results and what they meant. I replayed every day of my relationship with Marcus, every moment around the time Dylan was conceived, searching for some explanation that made sense. I had been completely faithful to Marcus. I was certain of that. But I was also certain that Dylan was my biological son. He'd literally come out of my body, which meant someone else was his father. But who and when? And how was it possible that I had no memory of being with anyone else? The only explanation that made any sense was assault, but I had no memory of that either. There's no gaps in my timeline, no unexplained injuries, no trauma responses, nothing. I finally worked up the courage to call my mother on Saturday. I needed to show her the photo I'd found and demand answers about who the man in it was. "Sarah, honey, you sound terrible. Are you sick? Mom, I need you to come over now. We need to talk about something important." She must have heard the desperation in my voice because she didn't ask questions. "I'll be right there." When she arrived, I was sitting at my kitchen table with the photo in front of me and Dylan on my lap. Mom took one look at the photo and went completely pale. "Where did you find this?" "In your photo albums. You said it was an old friend, but that was a lie." "Mom, this baby looks exactly like Dylan. Exactly. I need to know who this man is." My mother sat down heavily, staring at the photo like it might disappear if she looked at it hard enough. "Sarah, some things are better left in the past. It's not this, not when it affects my son." "Mom, I had Dylan's DNA tested." Her head snapped up. "You what?" "Marcus isn't Dylan's biological father. The test came back 0% probability, so I need to know who his real father is, and I think this photo is connected somehow." My mother started crying, not just tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that scared me. I'd seen my mother cry maybe 3 times in my entire life, and never like this. "Mom, what's going on? Who is the man in this photo?" She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes and said the words that changed everything. "That's your father. Your biological father." The world tilted sideways. "What? No, that's impossible. You said my father left when I was 2. You said you didn't have any pictures of him." I lied. "About what? About him leaving?" About everything, Sarah. About all of it." I stared at her, holding Dylan closer to my chest, like he could anchor me to reality. "I don't understand." My mother took a shaky breath and began to tell me a story I'd never heard before. My biological father hadn't left when I was 2. He'd never known I existed. She'd had a brief relationship with him when she was young, and when she found out she was pregnant, she'd been too scared to tell him. He'd already graduated college and moved across the country for work. But why lie about him leaving? Why make me think he'd abandon us? Because it was easier than admitting I'd been too cowardly to tell him the truth. And later, after I met Robert and we built our life together, it seemed better to let sleeping dogs lie. I was struggling to process this revelation, but there was still a crucial piece missing. "Mom, that doesn't explain Dylan. How does any of this connect to my son?" She was quiet for a long time, and I could see her wrestling with whether to tell me something else. "Mom, your father came back to Portland about 2 years ago for work." My blood went cold. "What do you mean he came back?" "He got transferred here. Works for the same company Marcus works for." The room started spinning. Marcus's company wasn't huge, but it wasn't tiny either. About 200 employees across several departments. "Have you seen him?" "Once, at Marcus's company picnic last year. You introduced me to several of his coworkers, and one of them was your father. You have no idea who he is, but I recognized him immediately." I thought back to the company picnic. I'd introduced my mother to dozens of people that day. "What's his name?" "David Chen." I knew David. He was in Marcus's department, maybe 10 years older than us. Friendly guy, divorced, no kids that I knew of. We'd chatted briefly at the picnic, and I'd seen him at a few work parties since then. Was attractive, I suppose, but I'd never thought of him as anything more than Marcus's colleague. "Mom, are you suggesting that David Chen is Dylan's father? Because that's impossible. Never been alone with him, never even had a real conversation with him." But even as I said it, I was remembering something from Marcus's Christmas party the previous year. I'd had too much wine and had gotten separated from Marcus in the crowd. David had offered to help me find him, and we'd ended up talking by the bar for maybe 20 minutes while we waited. But that was it, just talking. Nothing had happened. I was sure of it, wasn't I? The weeks following my mother's revelation were the darkest of my life. Marcus was staying at his brother's place, communicating only through texts about when he could see Dylan. My world had completely imploded, and I was left trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed to have crucial pieces missing. I became obsessed with that Christmas party, replaying every detail I could remember. The more I thought about it, the more gaps I found in my memory of that night. I remembered talking to David by the bar, but I couldn't remember how the conversation ended or how I had gotten home. I remembered Marcus being upset about something, but I couldn't recall what. The possibility that something had happened that I couldn't remember was terrifying. Had I been drugged? Had I been assaulted? The idea made me physically sick, but I had to consider it. Because the alternative that I had willingly cheated on Marcus and somehow blocked it out was even worse. I finally worked up the courage to approach David directly. Found him in the parking garage after work one day, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode.
"David, could I talk to you for a minute?" He looked surprised but friendly.
"Of course, Sarah. How's the baby?" The way he asked made my skin crawl. Not because it was inappropriate, but because something in his tone suggested he knew more about Dylan than a casual acquaintance should. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. This might sound crazy, but I need to ask you something about Marcus's Christmas party last year. His expression immediately changed. The friendly smile faded, and he looked guilty, nervous, I couldn't tell. What about it? Do you remember talking to me that night by the bar? He was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, I think you should probably talk to Marcus about this. Marcus and I aren't exactly talking right now. Please, David, I need to know what happened that night. He looked around the parking garage like he was checking to make sure we were alone, then stepped closer to me. How much do you remember? The question confirmed my worst fears. Something had happened that I couldn't remember. Not enough, apparently. Did we... Did something happen between us? David ran his hands through his hair and let out a long breath. Sarah, you were really drunk that night. Really drunk. Oh. And you were upset about something with Marcus. I think you'd had a fight earlier. I said yes, because I was worried about you getting home safely. My legs felt weak. I leaned against a concrete pillar for support. Did we... Did you and I... You kissed me in my car outside your house, and then you asked me to come inside. I felt like I was going to throw up. Did you? For a few minutes. But Sarah, you were so drunk you could barely stand up. I helped you to your couch and left. I swear to you, nothing else happened. I would never take advantage of someone in that condition, but something did happen. Dylan is your son. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. That's impossible. I had a paternity test done. Marcus isn't Dylan's biological father, and you're the only other man I've been alone with in the past 2 years. David was shaking his head frantically. Sarah, I promise you, we didn't have sex. I left. I went home. We can ask my neighbor. She saw me get home around midnight. We stared at each other in the parking garage, both of us trying to make sense of an impossible situation. If David was telling the truth, then what had happened to me that night? How had I gotten pregnant by someone I couldn't remember being with? The answer came from an unexpected source. 2 days later, Marcus called me for the first time since he'd left. Sarah, I need you to be completely honest with me about something. Okay? That Christmas party. The night you're asking David about. Do you remember what we fought about earlier that evening? I searched my memory, but came up blank. No, I don't remember fighting at all. We fought because you were flirting with David, and when I confronted you about it, you got angry and told me that if I was going to be jealous and controlling, maybe we weren't right for each other. The memory came flooding back like a dam had burst. We had fought. I had been flirting with David not because I was interested in him, but because I was feeling ignored by Marcus, who had spent the entire party talking business with his boss. It was petty and stupid, but I'd been drinking and feeling sorry for myself. I remember now, I said quietly. And do you remember what happened after we fought?